Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 10th lecture of the information visualization course entitled Multimedia Analytics. I've been looking forward to this one, as this is what I'm personally working on and actively researching. So let's go. So today we're going to talk about the analytics of multimedia data, which comprise the following data types, or as they are called, modalities. So we're going to have images and videos. Those are jointly also called visual data. We're going to have text, we're going to have metadata, and possibly some other modalities. For instance, geospatial information can be treated as an additional modality as well. So you have this hodgepodge of data, which is generally led by visual data and/or text. And you want to intelligently analyze this type of rich data jointly. We're going to go over a multimedia analytics theory, which happens to be based on my own work of a couple of years ago. But I assure you that this is the state-of-the-art multimedia analytics theoretical model. So it's not just for me to introduce my work, but it's actually useful for the topic. And we're going to discuss some example systems. So starting with multimedia, to better define what multimedia actually is. So it's a new variable type that we introduce. And basically the top level is called a collection. So you have a collection of multimedia data, and that is composed of individual items. And item basically means a data instance with multimodal data. So you have data that belongs to various modalities that are tied to this single unit. So an item formally comprises all or some of the following. So you have the content, which is the actual raw multimedia data. So here in this example picture we have images. So this parrot is one item. But we also have associated content. We have annotations, so we can have text that is associated with the item. Those can be labels, comments, captions, or tags. Here we are considering free text, so text as in the new data type that we have introduced yesterday. And we can also have metadata. So metadata is all tabular data descriptors such as EXIF or GPS coordinates. And what we mean by tabular is that they fit into a table. So you have items and you have various columns. So you can have categories, ordinal variables. You can have your interval ratio variables and so forth. So all of these pieces of the information, these modalities, belong to a single item. So we have the actual visual content. We can have an annotation, such as if it's maybe from social media, somebody will write, hey, this is a nice parrot. And metadata is going to be the GPS where this was shot, or EXIF data, such as the focal length or aperture, details of the camera that it was shot with. And we might want to, for the general multimedia analytics purpose, we might want to utilize all of this data jointly. Further to that, we can have computed and/or derived values that are obtained by processing or transforming the data. So we can have, those are marked in black, those are the features. Those are machine extracted descriptors of the data. We're going to talk about these later. We can also have similarity. So there is a choice of metric on top of the features that will establish a mathematical structure of the data. And we're going to see that this is not objective at all. And we can also have some further statistics, some summary information about the data that we derive using statistical methods. This model of multimedia collections assumes a flat collection structure. So you have your collection, and in it you have individual items. But of course, sometimes you have explicit hierarchies or explicit groupings as a part of the collection, which can be treated as additional information to be leveraged. So that can be something on top of the structure discussed here. What is important to realize about multimedia is that it's a completely different data type compared to what we've seen before. It's one of the highest bandwidth data formats in existence. which immediately makes multimedia challenging to process, because your single item, if you're operating with video collections, can have hundreds of megabytes or even gigabytes of storage space or of memory. And what is also very tricky about multimedia is that many statistical and mathematical techniques are completely useless. So operators such as less than or more or greater than, they don't really make more sense. So you cannot say that this image is less than this, which is less than this. Doesn't make any sense. You cannot use summary statistical techniques such as show me the average image. So if you average all images, actually a friend of mine tried this. So he has averaged images of basically art, a huge art collection, I think, from the Rijksmuseum, and the result, the average image from the Rijksmuseum was a brownish blob with a slightly lighter shade of brown in the center. So that's just the Gestalt law of figure and ground, that objects in the foreground, which tend to be in the center, are brighter than the background. So that was the beautiful average image. So it was indeed completely useless. And also you cannot subtract or add images. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, you can do it mathematically, but you might be disappointed in the result. So that results in further unique challenges that are separate for the human and the machine, and we're going to go over those. So what is multimedia analytics? Multimedia analytics has been defined as the combination of visual analytics and multimedia analysis. So the field is very young. It has only been defined in 2010. So we're still in the early years of multimedia analytics. And I mean, to go over the two constituent disciplines, we already know what visual analytics is, and multimedia analysis is an umbrella term for models that are based on advanced automated multimedia analysis algorithms, basically. So that's machine learning, computer vision, information retrieval, anything that can work with semantic information from your multimedia data. There's an interesting distinction between multimedia and text analytics because text corpora can also be considered multimedia data based on the definition that I have given you a couple of slides ago. And information retrieval and natural language processing can and indeed are considered constituent disciplines of multimedia analysis. So that would hint at text analytics being a subset of multimedia analytics. But in the communities, it isn't considered as such. And the reason for that is that text analytics is the older and by far the more populous discipline. Multimedia analytics with visual content is a much younger discipline. And of course, if you're the newcomer, then you cannot assume to subsume the already existing work. So currently, the distinction is generally made as follows. If your data set is a text corpus, or multiple corpora, possibly with some images and figures in the documents, then you're doing text analytics, even if you leverage the information in these images. If your data set is an image and video collection, possibly with associated text, then you're doing multimedia analytics. That's how it's considered currently. Personally, but please treat this as my opinion, as one of the researchers / practitioners in the field. I'm not speaking for the community. I feel that multimedia analytics should be the umbrella term, and image analytics, video analytics, and text analytics used for the respective collection type analytics. But the reality is what's written in the first bullet point. So if we recall we said that multimedia analytics is visual analytics plus something. So if we recall the visual analytics pipeline, it applies to multimedia in full. So this little diagram is fully applicable, and we're gonna discuss the individual components further. And of course, it's important to support and maintain the analytics flow. Well, the arrows in the diagram, basically. So all of the theory that you have learned in visual analytics applies fully here with some applications and instantiations, basically.
We have a small question. Does sound and music also fall under the multimedia umbrella?
Yes, yes. Audio is indeed a type of multimedia data. Absolutely. So
all right, thanks.
yeah. All right. So we can go over the 4 components of visual analytics for the world of multimedia, basically. So starting with the data, we have already introduced the variable, but there's more to it. So if we go over a bit of a history, it's just this one slide. Don't worry. It's we can see that how multimedia data has started becoming important. It's a actually a very recent thing. The timeline starts with 1993, and which is when the first browser, web browser that was very capable of displaying image and multimedia information in HTML came to existence. It was called Mosaic. It's actually for those of you interested in software history, it's a very interesting piece. I would say quite ahead of its time. In 1998, Google came to existence. In 2000, we had our first smartphone, which didn't look like that back then, but still. And then in the middle of the 2000s, we had a barrage of platforms that are very relevant to this day. Well, Flickr maybe not so much anymore, but still. And those are evidently focused on multimedia data. So we have Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Flickr. In 2010, we saw the inception of Instagram, and TikTok, which is a rather recent thing, has also been moving the world around in the recent years. So we see that multimedia data, and this is just the, let's say, casual / social media branch of multimedia history, that it has started becoming very, very important over the years. But now let's go over the multimedia data proper and see some of the associated challenges. So if I give you this image, what is this? So if you take a moment to form some opinions of it, and if we just try to describe the image, then we see it's an orchard with houses in the distance. There is a path through an alley in the lower right corner here. We can see this. We can, for example, count the trees or the houses if it's relevant to us. With domain knowledge, we might recognize, for example, the plant species, so what kind of trees these are, and or the architectural style of the houses. We can make some inferences about the season this was shot in. So we see a cloudy sky, and the vibe. I mean, we see leaves on the trees, so it was shot possibly in spring or summer. We're not sure, but this definitely doesn't look like a late autumn / winter picture. And we might want to know, where is this? So again, we start thinking. We see that there is a flag on one of the houses right here. So we localize the flag and inspect it in detail. In this case, we zoom in, we mentally correct the shape. We utilize our knowledge about flags. If not, there's a helpful chart on the left. And so this was probably shot in the Czech Republic. And indeed, the shot was taken on the Petřín Hill in Prague. So we can learn this information rather easily, right? And in addition to objective information, which we have just extracted, there could be any other, there could be associations, right? So there is possibly subjective information, so some personal experience and opinions of the user. There can be contextual information. So this can stem from either from this image being related to others in the collection, or to the purpose of our analytics. Maybe we are following a suspect, and they have kind of reported their location by shooting this picture. Or maybe you can put this in context of previously acquired domain knowledge that is not encoded in the image proper. So this can all add to the information. And note that these knowledge pieces can be and often are the most important. So because different users have possibly different additional knowledge, which is a challenge for multimedia analytics. So if to give a particular example, This is one of my favorite places in Prague. So the image makes me think of some nice moments I have experienced there. And since I'm a person born in Prague, I can consider myself a domain expert, and I can recommend this location to visitors. It's a nice stroll there. So if you're ever in Prague, you might want to visit. So for example, if somebody is interested, I can start thinking about the directions to get here when they ask me how to get there. And of course, the directions how to get here from your hotel is not explicitly encoded in the image or in the associated metadata. And both of these thoughts completely overpower thinking about describing the scene. So I never think about this image saying, okay, yeah, there are the trees, localizing the objects, there are the houses. I focus on the additional information actually. So this is interesting. I mean, and if this is a random image to you, which it probably is, then think about how you think about your vacation pictures. If you're taking photos on vacation, more often than not, when you see a picture, you associate the moment, what day it was, and what did you experience that day. So and indeed, you don't think about that there being some sea, some coconut palms, maybe. You know, it's so the additional knowledge is indeed very important. So the human versus machine. Note that extracting all of this knowledge, or the knowledge that you actually could have extracted given your prior experience, was incredibly easy. If I gave this to you as a task, asking you describe this image, describe what you see in this image, you would start answering immediately, pretty much. So our brain is very fast in processing visual information. And we look at the image, and all this rich semantic information simply jumps at us. We have been trained to do this by centuries of evolutions. So from the, let's say, formal perspective, we can say that humans are excellent multimedia data analysts, especially when it comes to visual data. So also when it comes to text data, but to summarize a piece of text, you need to read it, you need to think about it a bit maybe, but an image, you see it and you know exactly what's in it. So that's those are very high capabilities, right? But now let's consider what the machine sees, right? So this is the raw data. It's a very vibrant picture for us, but the machine sees just this: a matrix of RGB values, which and it's the height times the width size. So, and this image had the dimensions of 4,672 times 3,175. So so it's a 15 megapixel image, and you have 15.1 million values in this one image alone. So which is for the machine by default, this is completely abstract information. So this is what I meant with high bandwidth data, and this is just an image, not even a video. And so what do we do with this, right? So to make sense of the data, the machine must construct a feature representation of the data. So those machine readable descriptors that encode interesting information about the image. In the early years of computer vision, the features were a collection of stats such as color histograms, brightness, things that you can derive directly from the RGB values in this matrix, right? After that, we have seen an era of handcrafted features, so some more complex math on top of the matrices, such as Sift feature vectors or the Fisher vectors. And nowadays, usually we extract semantic features with a convolutional neural network and use those. And this feature representation is then used to extract semantic information. And I mean, it's worthy if I reiterate what semantic means in this context. So those are basically content related or meaning related observations. So if you extract semantic information, so so semantic information is that there is indeed a row of houses on top of an orchard which seems to be on a hill. That's semantic information. But if I tell you that this is an image with 15.1 megapixels, then I'm not, that's not semantic information. Those are the technical parameters of the image. So something that is directly evident from looking at the matrix, or just doing some simple computations for the sake of doing math, basically. So semantic is content / meaning related in in the context of this lecture, and also pretty much of the previous, when we were talking about text. And if you think about it, then to extract all this information that we have as humans, each of those little analysis subtasks that we have done so seamlessly is a complex computer vision task, and it's often an open research question. So approaches exist, so it's not something that is unsolvable, but it's still open. So we still haven't achieved perfection. So for instance, to be able to say this image contains trees and houses, you need to do concept detection. If you want to construct a meaningful one-sentence summary of the image, there's the discipline of image captioning. If you want to say observations such as the houses are on top of the hill above the orchard, there are trees, there is a flag on the top of one of the houses, then you're performing object localization. And for instance, if determining the exact boundary between the trees, houses, and the sky is related to image segmentation. So, and there are other tasks that we do so naturally, but are challenging for the machine. And also note there's one big caveat, is that obviously the machine cannot put things into context, and it cannot extract domain-specific knowledge unless it was specifically trained to do so for a specific domain. So you have basically tailored your entire project developing this kind of multimedia analytics app to do exactly this. So suppose that the general multimedia analytics system would find the flag and correct its distorted shape. So it would see have the nice kind of rectangle with proper texture, and it would not have it flowing in the wind, and it would recognize it correctly. Say, hey, this is a flag, and this is how it looks as a rectangle, which itself is a big challenge. But let's assume it can do that. Then, unless the system is particularly trained or designed to be a flag searcher, it would never occur to it to match the flag to an external database of world flags and find the correct country, right? So, and this is something that we do basically cognitively for free if we're interested. And of course, if we're talking about subjective and experience-based prior knowledge, that's of course out of the question. So and for obvious reasons, because the machine cannot work with information about our previous experience if it doesn't have the experience itself, right? But this is a phenomenon that is very well known in the world of computer vision. It's called the semantic gap. And semantic gap is defined as the disproportion between the information extractable by a human from a multimedia item and the information extractable by a machine from the machine representation of the same item. So the semantic gap has been defined in the year 2000. So it's already a 21-year-old concept, but it's still there. So as we discussed, and this serves as a bit of a summary of what we have talked about before, humans are able to extract very complex and abstract semantics. They can recognize them instantly and put them in context, whereas for the machine, the semantics are limited, only what you actually encode in the feature representation. It takes time and is computationally costly. It has to go through 15 million values just for this one image, for instance, and there is no context. So there is a clear gap that is still looming there, even though progress has been made. Okay, so is the conclusion that machine is bad and there is no point to multimedia analytics? Well, not exactly. The machine has unique capabilities that are very helpful to us as humans. So a machine is way better than humans in iterating fast over large amounts of data. It will never get tired, and it will analyze each item with the same diligence. So as long as you have the time, then you can keep throwing items at the machine, and it will always give you the correct result. If you try going over 10,000 images in a rapid sequence, that will be challenging for you as a human. I mean, I can tell. A colleague of mine from Eindhoven has done this rapid serial visual presentation experiment on me. So he showed me 25,000 images in a very rapid sequence, if I remember, and the experience was almost hallucinogenic. So I saw this rapid presentation of these images. I was supposed to perform simple tasks. When I walked away from this experiment, it took like 30 minutes. Then I felt the sidewalk wobbling under me. So it's very challenging to go over large amounts of image data in rapid sequence. But for a machine, that's no problem. So that's great. And even though the semantic gap is still pretty much a thing, it has been considerably narrowed in the last 20 years. So we can do way more than we could do 5, 10, 20 years ago. So the semantic capabilities are actually quite good these days. So there is something to be leveraged there, and it's actually quite a lot. And exactly these two ingredients unlock a great potential for intelligent multimedia analytics models if you do them right. Yes, and I think that we're approaching a break, right?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I forgot to interrupt you.
No problem. Are there any questions?
For the moment, no, I think not. Just somebody mentioned, yeah, if you can give a broader explanation of the exam, but perhaps that's something for the end of the lecture. Or
yes, but I can address it now. So I am nearing the completion of the preparation of the example exam, as I have written on Discord twice yesterday, I believe. It's going to come towards the end of the week. You're going to have the example exam with exact specifications on how the exam is going to be conducted. At the very latest, if something happens, it's going to be beginning next week. But I will really aim hard for this being available towards the end of this week already. So that will be about the exam, and we can take a break now. And I'm going to see you at 32. Okay, so we can continue. Were there any questions during the break?
No, there were no questions in the break.
Very good. So we have started talking about the data in multimedia analytics, and that there are challenges for the human and for the machine. And we have identified that both of these actors have unique capabilities that offset the weaknesses of the other. So let's keep going in how we can tie these together. Finally, a word on similarity. So of course, if we have similarity measures, if we have multimedia items if we can compare them meaningfully, determine their distances, then this will establish a structure that we can then explore in our multimedia analytics system, right? But we have talked about the meaningfulness of a basic operators such as less or greater than being meaningless, and about the summaries being problematic as well, such as averages. So how do we determine similarity, right? So we can do a little exercise. So if you see these three images, which one of them is the odd one out, right? One can say that the phone booth, because the other two both contain women, Queen Elizabeth II and Little Red Riding Hood, a popular character from European fairy tales. You can also argue that it's the Little Red Riding Hood because the other two both concern England. And you can also say that the Queen doesn't belong there because the other two both contain a prominent red object, right? So the takeaway here is that the notion of similarity can also be subjective, or maybe not subjective, but task related, depending on what you're trying to find. And this needs to be taken into account as well. So there, of course, are generic similarity metrics, such as Euclidean, cosine, or Mahalanobis, and there are many others. So absolutely, you can rely on them, and many algorithms indeed do. But in the true analytic context, it's good to realize that it's important to support what the user considers similar. So this really places focus on these arrows between the visualization and the model that the user, especially in the multimedia context, should be able to drive the model, and the model should further drive the visualization. So to summarize the data, multimedia data is a rich, varied, and information-dense data type. We have to be mindful of the semantic gap. Humans are much better than machines in extracting semantic information from multimedia data, but machines are way better in processing larger volumes of multimedia data. So again, as I said, different strengths and weaknesses for both key pieces of the analytics process. And context and subjective information is often crucially important. Moving on to visualization. If we're visualizing multimedia data, so if we discuss the key ingredients, we already know techniques for visualizing text and metadata. Those are the visualizations that we have had previously. This design remains in place for multimedia analytics. We are familiar with multi-view design, so we can consider plotting different modalities in different views, and possibly connecting them with the connect interaction. And all that remains is to cover visualizing visual data. So actually, how do we visualize images and videos, and especially collections? So visualizing one image, the best general visualization for one image is the image itself. That doesn't surprise anyone, given that we can extract everything so fast, and this is where we have the complete information. So unless we're really looking for specific things, so that we need cues, like we're looking for flags, so there will be like a little box over here. If you just visualize the image, then you're doing well. So that's easy. Visualizing a video is basically similar to images. The most complete visualization is the video itself. But of course, unlike images, videos can sometimes be long. So if you have a 5-hour surveillance tape where you're trying to detect whether somebody was breaking in, then it's probably not the most efficient action to just watch the entire footage uninterrupted. So what we do is we extract keyframes and show those. So here we see a video maybe about locks and keys. And if we extract the keyframes, we actually see that it's about lock picking that lock. So it's not about opening the lock with the keys, but it's a lock picking exercise. So it gives us an immediate nice overview of what the video is about. And of course, thus you convert the video into an image collection, and then you use your theory for visualizing collections of images, which we're gonna show further. Wait, now it tries to play the video, but I want to go further. Yes. So how do we visualize many images? How do we visualize collections? So this is a visualization of 1,600 images, and you can see that it's actually quite challenging and taxing for our perceptive capabilities, and this is still considered a trivial data set. So if we inspect it in more detail, we can make some observations that there seems to be a lot of red objects, and especially from these nicely figure and grounded images. So again, Gestalt laws are helping us even here. We can see that this is probably about cars, but that's it kind of. So there seems to be Ferrari here based on the logos. But but that's all we can say about the data set. So there is way greater richness of information in this data set, of course. So just visualizing it like this is not the best idea. If we kind of split approaches that visualize visual data, we can identify 5 categories that we're going to go over in the following slides. So the classic visualization is the grid. It's by far the most used multimedia visualization because it utilizes screen space very nicely. You show the image with images with little gaps between. And basic in this regard means that the ordering of images is either arbitrary or it's not content based. So it's not based on some semantic ordering. It's maybe, you know, ordered by file name or by, I don't know, like the GPS information that is directly readable from the metadata. So that's what's considered basic grid in this taxonomy. If we have associated text and metadata with the images, we usually reveal them in a side panel. So there will be something here, and if you select each individual image, it will kind of update to show the metadata about that respective image. Or we can have this upon interaction. So if we click on an image, an overlay detail window will pop up if we select the thumbnail. So those are the two classic ways to do this. So that's the grid. Again, by far the most populous. You're going to see this in over 90% of image collection visualizations. The other ones are way more niche in comparison. Well, except the next one, but we're going to get to that. Similarity space, we have already seen that before when we were talking about multidimensional data. What we do here is we utilize the dimensionality reduction method on our images, and we plot the thumbnails in 2D. So this is a figure that is familiar from our previous slides, UMAP versus TSNE on the fashion MNIST dataset of 10 categories of fashion items. Then we have a similarity-based approaches, which is a combination of the previous two. So we compute similarity space and then snap the images to a grid. Or we can arrange items based on the results of a content-based query. So again, examples. This is again UMAP. UMAP worked on a butterfly data set. So we have our butterflies clustered or dimensionally reduced by UMAP and then snapped to a grid. So we see a nice continuum from the butterflies with light or translucent wings all the way to the darker colored wings. So this is an example of the first one, and this is the classic of the classics. If you just search for images in Google, it will show you a grade based on results of a content-based query. So you can search by text, and you can also search by images these days. So that's a query by example, so called. So yeah, these are very very classic. So this is part of the 90%, over 90% that I've been talking about. So semantic capabilities are way more widespread these days. If we have image spheres such as in this system by Georgi, those are also considered grids for the purposes of this taxonomy, and so are image landscapes. So this is a very nice app called Kiano by Kai-Uwe Bartel. They have won best demo at ACM Multimedia with this, and it will nicely snap your images to a grid based on some similarity structure, and then you can pan over this like you would over a map. So that's a bit of an alternative way to view images or a large number of images, and you can scroll in any of the four directions. So it gives you this nice Google Earth style view of your image collection. The next one is spreadsheets. So spreadsheets, as the title says, those are just images displayed side by side with metadata in a table. So that's again a very familiar table, is a very familiar visualization. So why not use it for multimedia as well? And finally, we have thread-based. So you have a focus image in the center, and there are threads of related images originating from the center that you can follow. So if this would be a video, maybe, then this would be the normal timeline of the video. So you will be able to kind of jump 5 seconds before, 5 seconds after, and here are semantic threads that are somehow tied to the focus frame in the center. So this is called thread-based. So we have had a couple of possibilities to visualize visual data. Maybe there are others. Maybe this is not such a comprehensive taxonomy, but it should definitely cover the mainly used metaphors, as well as some of the key niche metaphors that have appeared in related work in the past 15 years. But what do we desire from our visual data visualizations? So we want efficiency of screen space utilization, including avoiding clutter. Individual images are very demanding screen space wise in the first place. So to be able to display an image such that you can, or a thumbnail such that you can make some sense of it, it will require some screen space. It's not as if you're doing a scatter plot and you're plotting one point. That glyph would be way smaller. So screen space is at a premium. And visualizing entire collections must be efficient so that we have a meaningful overview. So you want to show everything meaningfully, but you will want to be able to show an overview, show many images at the same time. Then we want navigability along various dimensions, and preferably semantic dimensions, so that you can navigate along meaningful directions, and not just based on the technical information about the image. The logic there is that we cannot just place everything on the screen, and even if we could, it would exceed our cognitive limits, so we wouldn't be able to perceive everything at once. So meaningful and efficient navigation between parts of the collection is thus very important. And finally, since we're in the domain of multimedia, we want support for heterogeneous data. We said that we have multiple modalities, and yes, we can do multi-view, of course, but if we can integrate our visualization, then it would be better, right? So and if you show everything jointly, or multiple modalities jointly with the images, then it might lead to additional insights, because you don't have to zip your eyes along the screen to connect the dots. And here's a bit of a summary of how the individual approaches fare when it comes to these desired aspects. So the basic grid is very screen space efficient, but it's not very navigable if the ordering is arbitrary or non-semantic, and it's not very heterogeneous because you're only seeing the images, albeit very, very efficiently. So you need some side panels, and you need some overlays and extra space to see metadata, basically, or additional information, additional modalities. Similarity space approaches are not very screen space efficient. They're excellent and navigable, probably the best out of all, because as long as our dimensionality reduction was meaningful, and we have some nice meaningful clusters, which should be achieved using the modern techniques, then we can really navigate the structure of the collection. But again, the heterogeneity is not as great, because we are just showing little thumbnails. So and we need extra interaction to see the additional modalities. The similarity-based approaches, so the grid with an underlying structure, is doing great on efficiency. It's a grid, and it's doing admirably on navigability, because we have introduced semantic dimensions. So it's more meaningful to us. We can navigate it meaningfully, but still, because it's a grid, the heterogeneity is not that great. When it comes to spreadsheets are super efficient if you have rich multimodal information. So if you only have images, then spreadsheet is pretty much the worst when it comes to efficiency. But if you have rich metadata, rich annotations, lots of modalities, then it's pretty much the best, the most screen space efficient way to cram everything on the screen. Well, not cram, but to show everything on the screen, and meaningfully. So if you have rich multimodality, and if the additional modalities are as important to you as the images themselves, then use a spreadsheet. It's a great way to do this. The same goes with navigability. So this is again dependent on the richness and importance of your modalities, and of course support for heterogeneity is excellent. When it comes to thread-based approaches, they are somewhat lacking when it comes to screen space efficiency. There is a lot of white space on the screen. They are navigable though, because you have your natural dimensions, especially for videos, such as the temporal axis, and you can navigate along semantic threads. And heterogeneous is supported rather well as well, because your threads don't necessarily have to be determined by the visual content, right? So you can have a thread by relatedness via text. As long as you mark it clearly, then it's one of the approaches that supports heterogeneous data rather well. So this is our categorization, our summary when it comes to visualizing visual data. To summarize, individual visual data items are best visualized by themselves. Collections must be visualized efficiently with good navigation capabilities and have to support visualizing the heterogeneous data that we might have in our multimedia collection. The vast majority of systems uses a variant of grid. So that's your default, that's your go-to. If you don't have a specific niche, then you can almost never go wrong with the grid, because it's such a familiar interface that everybody knows how to use it, that it's pretty much never a bad idea. But other visualizations exist and have their niche use. So as we said, if you have a lot of multimodal data, rich information in your other modalities that is as important or near equally important to you as the images, then it's better to use a spreadsheet maybe. And the other data modalities can be visualized using techniques introduced in previous lectures. And note that multi-view design is very applicable in this regard.
Yeah, also we have 3 more minutes, but there are also questions.
Yes.
Julia asks, are there any libraries available that easily generate these grids, or is it usually done manually?
Well, it's I wish I knew, honestly. So the grids are yeah. So I'm there for sure might be some frameworks, but whenever I was implementing a grid myself in HTML/CSS/JavaScript, I always required some custom behavior. So for the analytics purposes, that wasn't supported by any framework, right? So I always did this in a custom manner, and I will admit I was doing some creative Googling / Stack Exchange to get the correct behavior. So I'm afraid I don't have a standardized way to do this, or I don't know of any. There for sure must be approaches for if you just want an image gallery that you're just displaying the data. I think there must be plenty of libraries for that. And maybe they are extensible. So maybe your fellow students know something like that. But I generally opted for doing this myself, which so just plain HTML, CSS plus maybe JavaScript, because it's a time investment at first, but it really keeps your hands free when it comes to further design of the analytics, basically. So if you want to do something that you cannot really hook up nicely through the library, then yeah. So but I'll admit I'm not the greatest front-end developer there is. So your mileage may vary.
All right. And then Lucas asks, when would you use similarity space instead of similarity based, purely for giving an overview?
Yes. So I would say that I'm gonna go to the actual screenshots. Yes. So I would argue that similarity space is better to show coherent clusters. It would be interesting to actually have this visualization with similarity based, but if it's important for you to see the outliers or things that are drastically different, then similarity space is a better option, because here the distances between individual items are standardized. It's the same distance. So for instance, I don't know, picking one at random, this one could be an outlier. So in a similarity space, it could be all the way up here, but because it gets snapped to the grid, it will end up closely. So there also have been approaches such as self-organizing maps that somehow counteract this issue. So they are snapped to a grid of actually hexagonal thumbnails. So you don't have rectangles, but you have hexagons, and you have neighborhoods, and then the edge of the hexagon is the strength of the edge is proportional to the actual distance, which you can also do in the grid. So if you highlight the edge, then you can kind of introduce similarity. But from my experience, if you have a grid bigger than, let's say, 25, so 5 times 5, this is very difficult to read. So for overall separation of data, seeing clear outliers right away, this is better.
All right, thanks. I think that's all for now for our questions.
Very good. So let's take a 5-minute break, and I'm going to see you at 2 sharp. All right. So in the last section, we have talked about visualizing visual data, so multimedia visualization. So unless there were any further questions, so we can move on to the next section, which is going to be the model. So we're going to be talking about the model and how do we ensure that these especially these arrows, so that the visualization drives the model and the model drives the visualization, how this comes to pass. Okay, so already in the data section, I have argued that intelligence assistance with the user's task is especially needed for multimedia because there is no way to easily summarize the data, and thousands of images are already a challenge to the user. And if we are talking contemporary large-scale data sets that need to be analyzed, those are orders of magnitude bigger. So we want to support the user's task, but what task are we actually supporting, right? So we have defined something that we like to call the integrated model. So this one is a 4-tiered structure to think about the user's intentions and behavior when it comes to analyzing multimedia data. Many of those components are something that you have seen before. So, for instance, this interaction, you might recognize that these are already the 7 interactions by Yi and collective. So it's not all new. It's more like putting existing stuff into perspective with some new things on top of that. So the 4 tiers are objectives, procedure, intents, and methods. What is highlighted in bold, those are the components that are important for multimedia analytics, or something that we need to support. And the orange components are those where it's highly desirable that they operate on content semantics. So, for instance, if I pick something at random, like filter, then obviously we want to be able to filter on content. So show me only images of sheep, which is semantic information. That's not pertaining to the technical parameters or the information that is directly encoded and readable with the data. So that's an example of an orange. And if we look at something that is not that interesting, is, for example, determine range, right? So as we discussed, we don't really associate multimedia items with numeric values. So determine range, retrieve value, characterize distribution in the strictly mathematical sense, that is. So in the numeric sense, it doesn't make much sense because we're not associating multimedia items with numbers, right? So that's an example of some things that we don't have to really focus on when it comes to multimedia analytics. But these 4 tiers, instead of giving you the technical description, I think it's best illustrated with an example. So consider that we have an example of a medical scientist with a collection of medical scans to be analyzed. The objective, which is here as gain insight, makes sense, complete high-level task, blah, 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 is to find the incidence of cancer in the population, in the collection that is proportional to the population the scientist is investigating. her procedure is going to be exploring the scans, searching for symptoms, determining the distribution in the population. So those are series of high-level and low-level tasks. Each of those steps will exhibit an intent. So for instance, she would like to sort patients based on liver abnormality. That's an example. So this intent is the combination of visualization and interaction. And of course, the intent is accomplished through individual methods. So that's what the computer actually does. That means computing the ranking, visualizing the thumbnails of the scans, and maybe panning over the grid. So it's a bit of an amalgam of computations and visualizations structured into 4 tiers. And but okay, so if we're talking that procedure is completing some high-level tasks, so that's what we want to focus on next. There are many conceivable useful high-level tasks that you might want to do with multimedia, right? You can explore, you want to rank, you want to find relevant items, structure, search, browse, summarize, or find needles in the haystack. So that's, for example, when you're a forensic researcher and you want to find evidence for a crime. You're not going to have millions of images of evidence, but you might have millions of images, and 4 of them is going to be evidence, and you want to find them. So that's what we mean by this. And if you think about it, you can actually place all the tasks on the exploration search axis if we're thinking about multimedia. The 2 extremes are, well, exploration and search, where exploration means that the user does not know much about the collection beforehand and wants to discover what's in it or understand it. So I have large volume of data. I need to go through it. I need to get a grasp on it. This will mean that the mental model is going to be dynamic. So you will be thinking about the items. You will have some. This is relevant. This is not relevant. This is also relevant, but differently relevant than the first one. So you're gonna evolve what you think in your head quite a lot. So that's what's written here as continuously refined as the user progresses towards knowledge. And the other extreme, which is a bit more familiar when we were talking image search or whatever, it's search. So you have a very clear idea what you're looking for, and you just want to find it. And in this case, the mental model is therefore static. So if you're looking for pictures of I don't know, Dutch windmills, then your mental model is, okay, I want to find that Dutch windmills, and this is a windmill and this is not a windmill. Everything is very crisp, very static, very predefined, very nice. And all of these tasks that we have mentioned fall on the exploration and search axis, having a different proportion between exploration and search. Yeah, and what is very important here for in our quest for insight, or in the quest for to satisfy our objective, to reach our objective, we actually slide on this exploration search axis as needed, even in a single session. So we have talked about the medical scientist. So she's first going to be exploring, then she's going to find some relevant cases. So she's going to move towards search. Maybe then while inspecting these cases, she will find that there might be a different kind of disease found in the scan. So she will start exploring for more, and you slide like this back and forth until you have achieved insight. If you recall insight-based evaluation that we have discussed in the interaction and evaluation lecture, there were 5 characteristics of insight: complex, deep, etc. And this sliding on the exploration search axis matches these 5 aspects very well. So indeed, we may start exploring, finding something relevant, then we're searching, then we're going back to exploring again. And this dynamic nature needs to be reflected in multimedia analytics. So it all sounds very theoretical so far, but there is actually a nice simplification, because we humans think about multimedia data mostly in content semantic terms. So that's what we have been discussing throughout this lecture already. You know, we want to see the meaning, want to see the content, and that's what we focus on, or maybe even our subjective information that we have. And if you notice that whatever task we perform with multimedia, we assign various labels to the individual items. So whatever we do, we're actually categorizing. Exactly, because the mathematical computations don't really make much sense. Those are averages, finding ranges, etc. So all we are left with is that we assign labels, right? So that means that we can actually set so-called analytic categorization as an umbrella task for the entire exploration search axis. And this is indeed an excerpt from the four-tiered model. So what does analytic categorization mean? Analytic categorization means that we manually or automatically assign items into dynamic containers, the categories that can be named or unnamed, but they are defined by the analyst. That's the key thing to be underlined here, is that it's not predefined beforehand by our, maybe, let's say, classification labels or by some ontology, but it's strictly what the user thinks are categories of relevance. Those are our categories, and we are trying to model those with analytic categorization. So there is yet another gap. It's called the pragmatic gap. And that one says basically that analytic categorization is not classification, basically. So it's way more dynamic and flexible. So what it means to truly support analytic categorization is that you allow for the human to create new categories on the fly. The categories might be non-exclusive. So if you're going to say, okay, this image belongs to multiple of these categories, then this is not a problem for a human. And the category semantics can be dynamic. So even the meaning of the category can change over time. An example: suppose that you're a forensic investigator, and you're trying to see if a person was smuggling weapons. So you will form, in the, let's say, very basic sense, you will form two categories. One is not relevant, so that's where you discard the items you don't need, and the other is going to be suspicious, and the suspicious is actually going to mean smuggling weapons. But then you're going to find out that the person is not smuggling weapons, but they're dealing drugs. So you will still have a suspicious category, but it will change to a drug dealer, right? But it's still called suspicious. So it's not so. Analytic categorization means that as we slide on the exploration search axis, so as we perform all of these little subtasks in our overall quest towards insight, we are updating our categorical model in our head. So we form categories of relevance in our head that we assign items into. And this is completely dynamic. We can add new, we can remove categories on the fly, we can split them, we can merge them, we can relabel them, redefine. And our model, so the actual AI in multimedia analytics, is supposed to chase our mental model and be as up to date as possible, basically. So that's the game. So pragmatic gap is the difference between this flexibility and because categorization in machine learning is classification, right? Pretty much. And there we have static number of categories. We have exclusive categories, and we have static predefined category semantics. We train the model, and then it will be able to label unseen data into the correct category. But you cannot really change things, unless you retrain the model, of course, and you obtain new training data. So the classic multimedia analysis model, if you're talking the machine learning route to data science, that means that you have your collection, you extract your feature vectors, form a feature representation. You can maybe use some information directly from the collection, and you compute some statistics, and we have our favorite machine learning techniques: supervised learning, unsupervised learning, ranking. You can maybe change the algorithms or select a different model, and that will then you will hopefully proceed to knowledge like that. So that's the classic machine learning pipeline, which generally does not involve visualization. So it's not really multimedia analytics yet. So, and if we're talking about any modern systems so that you might think of that are able to work with multimedia data semantically, the classic paradigm is that you build an efficient index of the data, and then your analytic session boils down to a sequence of query response pairs. So you're forming queries. You pose the query to the system. It will return results that may or may not be relevant to what you're looking for. And if you're not satisfied with the result, then you repeat the process, and you pose a new query, you again receive a response, and then you keep going until you finish, basically. So this paradigm can't be beat when it comes to search.
Jan, a
Yes.
student asked if you could speak a little bit slower.
Right. I should. Sorry. I will do so. That's my problem. I'm gonna try to chill out a bit. Very good. So the classic paradigm where we are building an efficient index is very good when it comes to search, but as we have noticed, that's only one extreme of the exploration search axis. So we're going from exploration to search. Just search is merely one task that we might need in our quest for insight. And we have to be fair and say that modern indexes cover a very wide range of semantics. So they are actually very good. They can capture a lot of nuance, and especially if you have sufficient training data or used to construct the index, they can perform very well and definitely are a contender. But the problem is that they are still very rigid and predefined. So once you construct the index, that's it. Your users cannot adapt the index on the fly. And basically, when the user starts reasoning along dimensions that are not explicitly supported by the index, it doesn't really work that well. So if your user kind of falls out of the boundaries, then it's a bit of a problem. But that said, this doesn't mean that the classic machine learning techniques for multimedia analysis are not useful at all. On the contrary, they are very useful. We need them at the very least to extract a good feature representation. Otherwise, there is no chance for semantic support. I cannot fathom a modern multimedia analytics approach that doesn't use a deep net to extract features. That just can't happen reasonably. And in the model, if we just want to kind of hook the machine learning directly to our analytics system, we might still make use of clusters extracted through unsupervised learning or maybe dimensionality reduction. We still might want to use the collection index, still have it there for efficient searching, because filter is one of the 7 core interactions after all, and maybe other techniques. So it's definitely not. This is definitely not to say that the classic approach to the machine learning / computer vision / information retrieval or audio retrieval approach towards multimedia data science is wrong. Definitely not. But if we truly want to support the dynamic analytic categorization, there is still one piece missing, and we're going to go over that, and that is interactive learning. Interactive learning is a special case of supervised learning. Basically, what happens is that our collection starts as unlabeled, and then it will consist of interaction rounds. So in each of those rounds, you will have some suggestions produced by the machine presented to the user. On the first screen, it's going to be probably a random selection from the data because we don't have any information to start with. Then the user will assign class labels to the suggestions as she deems fit. So basically, you will see the images or the items, and you will think, okay, so I'm going to form my categories of relevance, dynamic categorization, right? Analytic categorization, and I'm going to say, okay, these are my categories. This is what I'm interested in, and I'm going to label the images accordingly. Then the user will submit these labels to the system. The system will use this information to retrain itself. So the model is going to be trained on the fly, and then it will present new suggestions for the next round. And then you keep going like this. So then you will have hopefully more relevant items. You label them again, thus refining the model, and you keep going until you retrieve what you are looking for. The catch is that the entire interaction round must complete in roughly about a second as a maximum, because otherwise it's not really interactive, right? Then we're going to have this laggy system, and it's super annoying to wait 5 seconds before our grid or our visualization reloads to reflect the new suggestions, right? So this must be so that's the catch, right? So we interact, we perform this online supervised learning kind of, but we have to be really interactive, which is a challenge for the multimedia analytics design. So as you can see, this paradigm is very well suited for the mantra which says that the visualization drives the model, and the model drives the visualization. So it very well implements these arrows between the visualization and the model. I mean, the visualization here is very simple. It's called results, but I mean, you can obviously see that this is supposed to represent the KIME visual analytics diagram. And there is a challenging trade-off between accuracy and speed, of course, because I mean, the faster you want your results, the less time you will have for computations, and the less accurate your results might be. So you need to find your sweet spot there. To give you an example of this interface, this is my most recent multimedia analytics system, where here we have 3 categories that we have explicitly labeled. One is birds, so that's actually this little fellow here. The other is flowers, and I have added 3 items here to the discard pile. So those are things I'm not interested in at the moment. So this means that at this particular moment in time, I was interested in birds and flowers, which I can change anytime I want. So if I'm not interested in birds anymore, I should be able to drop this category, and the model is not supposed to suggest birds anymore. Excuse me. Same with flowers, or maybe I can specialize this. Maybe I can say roses, and then I don't want to see other flowers, and so forth and so forth. And the reason why this can be so dynamic is that the model learns solely based on my interaction. So if I give a rose, and if I have given another type of flower before, and now I start labeling non-roses as negative, then the model gets an information. Aha, so this is not relevant anymore. So I'm gonna need to retrain myself better. So that's how it can support these dynamic decision boundaries between relevant and non-relevant data. There are a couple of variants of interactive learning. So suppose that we have 2 classes in the general case, the positive and negative, which is quite common. Positive means that those are the relevant items. Negative means the not relevant items. This is our collection. So we have dimensionality reduced it to 2 abstract dimensions. So think that this is maybe UMAP or TSNE. And the filled-in circles represent items that have actually been labeled by the user. So the user has said, this is relevant, and this is not relevant. We only have 3 labels, and the rest of the collection is currently unlabeled on this image. But based on these 2 labels, we can establish a decision boundary. So this can be like an SVM classifier that splits the space between the region with relevant data and non-relevant data. And based on the decision boundary, the model is of course able to estimate the class or the correct category, the correct analytic category that I have in my head for the unlabeled instances. So even though this is unlabeled, based on the decision boundary, it will think that that all of these are relevant and all of these are not relevant. But and now moving on to the variants of interactive learning. Suppose that the system can only suggest 3 items.
3 more minutes, by the way.
Okay. It can only suggest 3 items. So which ones should it suggest, right? Because there are many possibilities here to select 3 out of all of these empty ones. So the first and the classic variant is called relevance feedback. That one suggests relevant items in the model that the model is most sure about. So those 3 that the model thinks, yeah, these are definitely the most relevant based on the information I have. So there's going to be these 3 because they are the furthest from the decision boundary, right, in the positive region. I mean, the motivation for this variant is simple. That's exactly what the user wants, right? The user wants to see relevant items in the analytic context. So let's show it to her, right? The catch is, and so why is this a variant, and why is this not the variant? The reason is that receiving labels for these suggestions brings very little information to the model, because it was sure about these items in the first place. So if I then say, okay, yes, these 3 are relevant, then I haven't really said anything new to the model, right? And I mean, in the real world, it's never as simple as this, that you already have the boundary and it runs smoothly. Maybe this one is mislabeled, and maybe the boundary should run something like this. Who knows, right? This is, or maybe it should run like this. We only have these three labels, so adding these three labels doesn't bring much more information, right? So that's why we have the other dominant variant of interactive learning that you might see in the literature, in the machine learning literature. It's called active learning. And that one suggests items that the model is least sure about. So those that thinks, hey, is this relevant or not? So actually it will suggest those that are nearest to the decision boundary. So it will be these three here. Because if the user labels these, it adds the most useful information to the model at the cost of lowest number of labels. So if you assume that the user's time is expensive, which you should in basically throughout your information visualization design, not only for multimedia analytics, then you want to bother the user for as little labels as possible, as few labels as possible, rather. So and when the model is good enough, then it will be used to auto-label the rest of the data, because it's, oh yeah, now it's good. So this is the split based on your categories of relevance. So in the long run, you're going to save the user's time. The problem with this, especially in casual domains, is that the user doesn't see crisply relevant items. Because it will always see these little confusions. So the user might think, wait, is this an actual artificial intelligence? Does this make sense? So the value of your model might be in doubt. And for some items, it's impossible to decide even for the user. So that's the extra challenge. And we can stop here before we start talking about scale. Are there any questions?
Yes, there are a few. So first two content-related questions and then a different one. So Lucas is asking, do you keep the model after the session for next session or next user?
Yes, you can. So if the user is supposed to complete the same task and it's relevant for your domain, this is a good idea. Because it can guide the next person in their analytics, and collaborative analytics is a big topic in general. So you may do that.
All right. Then Liansen asks, in the case of analytical categorization, one could deal with a hierarchy of categories from the model and interaction point of view.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So the thing about categories is that they are completely flexible, and there can be a hierarchy that you establish in your working memory, but because we don't have the exclusivity thing. So you can have, one item might be in multiple categories. You can have one category that is, so I can have a category that is birds, and then I can have a category that is ducks and parrots. So if I have a picture of parrot, I can categorize it as both a parrot and a bird. So relaxing the restriction that one item equals exactly one class allows you this categories algebra that includes hierarchy.
Right, thanks. Then back to the last question. Do you have maybe an example of collaborative analytics?
Yeah. So for instance, again, going to the forensic case, right? So if you would have a team of forensic investigators trying to convict a terrorist organization, maybe, so they have large volumes of data, and they're working with the same purpose, then it could be useful if the first investigator takes a crack at the data set. He or she will work for 9 hours, maybe getting some categories of relevance that then he or she might communicate to the colleagues. Then it's useful if you preserve the model, and the next person will continue where the first one has left off, so that they can take turns. That's definitely a possibility. So that's the collaboration in the kind of sequential sense. Then there's also but this is still very open, and this is still very open for visual analytics in general, not for multimedia analytics only, and that is live collaboration between multiple analysts at the same time. So therefore, for instance, what you can do again in this forensic case is it can be okay. We have collected 50 million images from these suspects, and we have 50 analysts. So each gets 1 million, and we are collaboratively training a model. So we're kind of feeding. So we establish our categories of relevance beforehand, and we're feeding in images to a central model that could be maybe on some distributed system, and that one will be then used to suggest us relevant items from our million, basically. So that could be a nice application as well.
All right, thanks. Then Reitze asks, that's not related to the lecture, but that he is making an overview of the reading material and slides and so on, and wanted to ask you if it's okay if he links the slides to an open GitHub repository.
Absolutely. So if there is a community study material in how to say it, like initiative, then I will definitely support it. So absolutely. So the slides, use them as you wish. So for now, the slides are going to be like, when it comes to like licensing stuff. I was advised by the UvA that for the duration of the course, the study materials should be accessible to the students only. So that's also why the YouTube videos are link-based only. But after the course, I plan to make it open myself, and we can indeed do this. So I mean, this is the license information. So technically, you should make it only accessible to your fellow students if you're interested to have this license clean. But I do support initiatives for easier studying, definitely.
All right, I think that's all for questions for now.
Very good. So let's take the last 5 minutes, and then we're going to wrap up the lecture at 36. Okay, so let's finish the lecture. Were there any questions during the break?
No, there were no questions in the break.
Okay. So now let's talk about scale. That's a big challenge, especially for multimedia data. Also due to its high information density and high data size. And if you recall, in visual analytics, we want to pre-compute as much as we can to save considerable work in the analytics session proper, right? So that's one of the advices I gave, was try to pre-compute as much as you can, because then you're going to save yourself a lot of trouble. But there's a bit of a contradiction here, because analytic categorization is dynamic. So you need to support the user's thoughts and whims, and those you cannot pre-compute. But the users will still expect intelligent support, and they expect it in interactive time too. So how do we fare on scale? This is just a bit of a diagram to how do we add scale to multimedia analytics. One way to do this is to encourage good database management practices. So that's one dimension along which we can proceed. But how does it work for, let's say, interactive learning? So if we look at the scale of multimedia collections, it's a bit of history. So we're going to use money analogy for illustration, where $1 is going to be one image, and our basic building block will be the stack on the right. So this is 10,000 images. So that's a manageable stack, and up until roughly 2010, excuse me. 10K images was the large dataset boundary. So if you had more than 10,000 images, then you were in possession of a large image dataset. As we discussed before, for manual processing, so if you open up your file explorer and go over the images sequentially, it still remains a large dataset. It's challenging to do this. In this era, 2000s and up until 2010, interactive learning was in its prime. There were lots of relevance feedback and active learning approaches around because they gave reasonable performance, and it was also when it comes to the interactivity or responsiveness. However, in 2010s, the large dataset boundary jumped to 1 million images, and the modern classic machine learning approaches for multimedia, namely deep nets, combined with efficient indexing techniques such as product quantization, and there are multiple more hash-based methods. There's a plethora of techniques. They're actually quite capable of handling this scale, and deep nets even require it to an extent. So if you want to have a really robust deep net, it's best if you have hundreds of thousands of training examples at least. So these approaches completely taken over, and this was definitely the winter of interactive learning because they started considerably lagging behind. They exhibited very bad performance and they were no longer interactive. So you had to wait at best long seconds between interaction rounds. So that completely defeated the purpose. So the classic machine learning approaches have really taken over, and they have contributed greatly towards closing the semantic gap. So there is so I would say it's quite a fair victory over. I mean, it's not a competition, but it's not difficult to see why these approaches prevailed and were and still are preferred by many designers. But moving on towards now, so the contemporary challenge in the multimedia community is the YFCC 100M collection, which is a data set of 100 million images and videos. So you see that the scale has gone up from our little stack of banknotes. So this is our 10,000 here. I mean, the couch alone is 46.7 million, which and this data is a lot for any approach. It's large data period, but especially for interactive learning, right? So this is just comparing everything side by side. So 10,000, 1 million, 100 million. But fortunately, we have actually been able to develop interactive learning on 100 million images. So the idea is that we extract our semantic representation from the data. We then compress it. So there's a compression method involved, and then we are going through the interaction rounds, and we have and this is done efficiently as well, because you need to train a model, then you need to score the items, so you need to assign a classifier score to each of those items, so each of those 100 million, and then you have to present it to the user, and all of this has to happen around 1 second. So it's that's quite challenging. So we are able to achieve this by keeping a small number of features per image. So you have your feature vector, which is thousands of concepts, or the presence of nouns in the image. So things like, is there a tree? Is there a sky somewhere in the image, or a boat? You can do this by either preserving the top values, so you just select the concepts with top values, or you weight them by thresholding or TF-IDF. We don't have to go into detail here. It's all in the paper if you're interested, but yeah, there are multiple selection methods. You efficiently and sparsely encode the index value pairs. If you follow the method given, then you will reduce one item and modality to only 24 bytes. And for a 100 million data set with 1,000 visual features and 100 text features, the uncompressed data will take 880 gigabytes, whereas the Blackthorn representation is 183.5 times smaller at 4.8 gigabytes for 100 million images, which is quite reasonable. And you adapt the classifier such that the scoring is done directly in the compressed space. So we have compressed our features. But if we always had to unpack the feature back and then score 100 million items, then that would not go. So scoring directly in the compressed space saves massive amounts of time and enables the performance. Basically, what this does is that if we have run comparison experiments on a data set of 1.5 million images, so a reasonably large data set already, 1,000 visual features, 100 text features. And classic interactive learning took 4.7 seconds per interaction round. So that's beyond interactive. So that's a bit too long. And Blackthorn took less than 0.1 seconds, and in the worst case, so the worst case, it preserved 93% of the precision and 89% of the recall. So you're compressing data, so you might be losing information, but the worst case was pretty much equal performance. And there were even cases where the compression or discarding the noise, or it appears to have discarded the noise because the precision rose to 107% of the precision achieved by the classic interactive learning approach. And basically on 100 million, with, again, the same representation, the classic interactive learning was unusable because it ran out of memory. It's difficult to fit 880 gigabytes into RAM. And but our extrapolation and computations basically showed that it would take roughly 5 minutes per one interaction round, which is unreasonable completely. And Blackthorn remained fully interactive at roughly 1 second per interaction round. There's been subsequent work by colleagues from Copenhagen in Denmark. It's called Exquisitor. That's even faster. It adds unsupervised learning, namely simple hierarchical clustering, to leverage the structure of the data set. So you kind of pre-cluster the data. So this can be considered a hybrid approach where you take interactive learning, but you combine it with some of the classic methods. Because the idea is that Blackthorn always scores all 100 million items every interaction round. So that's a lot. And if you only focus on the promising clusters, that will really shave a lot of computational time off. And they have achieved 0.3 seconds per interaction round on 100 million images. So that's amazing. And only using a single CPU core, whereas Blackthorn uses 16. So this level of performance unlocks multimedia analytics for standard laptops or even higher end mobile devices. So the challenge of scale is looking very promising with recent work. To summarize, to summarize the model part of the lecture, multimedia analytics comes with specific needs. When it comes to the model, content semantics are important, but very difficult to automatically extract. We have the semantic gap. And powerful statistical tools such as average are meaningless for multimedia. We have discussed the four-tiered model, and we have observed that the tasks fall on the exploration search axis and are all a variant of analytical categorization because we think of multimedia items in categorical terms. This analytical categorization is way more dynamic and flexible than classic classification. So that's called the pragmatic gap, the difference between the two. Classic machine learning techniques are definitely useful. They have their place in multimedia analytics and should be used to their greatest extent. But the secret ingredient, if I can call it as such, is interactive learning. Scale is a big challenge because the more dynamic the analytic categorization, the less we can pre-compute, but the user still wants intelligent and interactive assistance. But as we said, the current algorithms are rather fast, so it's looking promising on that front. So this is how a multimedia analytics pipeline would look like. So if we instantiate the classic visual analytics pipeline into multimedia, this is kind of like a come together slide. So we have discussed all of these components separately. So this is the multimedia analytics pipeline, and you see that it's strongly tied to visual analytics indeed. Now, I would like to give you an example of three systems, just a brief overview. We're not going to go into great detail. We have already seen this visualization. This is the Fork browser by Org de Roy and Collective. They have done this chiefly for videos. So yes, this is thread-based navigation, focus image in the center, threads of potential interest, fork from it, as we discussed when we were talking about visualizations. There are two types of threads. So why is this a multimedia analytics system? Is that there are also dynamic threads. So threads can be created on the fly based on what you as the user mark as relevant. And there are, of course, static pre-computed threads that are based on the inherent structure of the data. This approach is especially suitable for video collections because the horizontal axis is the timeline of the video, and you can explore other dimensions, including semantic ones, in the forks. So that's a very nice system. And if when you're focusing here, you are marking the relevant images and or shots as relevant, and if you don't mark it, then it's considered that not relevant. And navigation path and the threads get updated to reflect your notion of relevance. So it's indeed is dynamic. It supports your mental model. Another example system are the multimedia pivot tables. That you have seen this before. Again, this was a spreadsheet metaphor system. So it's especially great for truly multimodal collections, as we discussed. And the predecessor system to multimedia pivot tables, which was called media table, it introduced a useful term for the analytic categories, and they have called it the buckets. So basically you define buckets and you're throwing images or your multimedia items into the buckets. It's actually quite a useful analogy that is used to this day. And the buckets or the analytic categories are active. So the active buckets means that the user can indeed define multiple buckets on the fly, add items to them, and the system will recommend new additions. So, and this is a big step towards closing the pragmatic gap because this is, as you can see, this is actually quite flexible. And you can combine this with the powerful pivot table aggregation technique that sees widespread use in spreadsheets. So pivot tables means that you can, that if you have your individual items, you can aggregate them based on a certain attribute. So you can say, okay, show me if you have, I don't know, stores across the Netherlands, then you have multiple per city. Then you can say, okay, aggregate by city, so you can show the performance of cities when it comes to your business. So that is called a pivot table. So like that you convert your flat table with individual instances into a data summary. And pivot tables allow for inspecting distribution. So we see some scatter plots here. There are some that are actually not very visible here, but these are supposed to be box plots. So you can kind of characterize the distribution meaningfully, which is sometimes rare for multimedia approaches. And the last example is my own work recently, II20, that stands for Image Insight 2020. That's supposed to be like a classic multimedia or not classic, but general multimedia analytics system for chiefly image collections. There are actually two complementary collection views. So I have added this classic grid, but I also have Tetris. So that images fall in. So we have buckets on the bottom, and the images are falling into the buckets from the top, and you steer it with the arrow keys to add them to the buckets. They are complementary. So the grid on the previous slide is a static batch mode visualization, whereas Tetris is a dynamic one image at a time metaphor. So you can really focus on one image, and it's there is some motions involved to kind of give you a pacing for the analytics. And of course, when the model learns, then the images are falling into the correct buckets themselves. So then basically the system plays the game itself, and you just watch it, and you only interact when it's necessary. But it will categorize the data on its own if the model is good. The analytic categories, which are again called buckets, much like in the previous work of Voring and Collective, they fully cover the pragmatic gap, because at any time during the analytics session, you can add new buckets, delete existing buckets, split and merge buckets, and redefine buckets. And each of these operations triggers a model update. And the model update happens in interactive time, even on data sets of millions of images. And the underlying model is interactive learning plus a collection index. So this is an example of the hybrid model that utilizes multiple machine learning techniques. And in addition to supporting the dynamic buckets, the model actually slides on the exploration search axis. So like we discussed, that when we are completing our analytics, we are going back and forth between exploration and search. Basically based on the number of relevant images seen in previous rounds, the model knows if it should suggest more exploratory images or more focused images that you're basically searching for more that you have already seen. And we have introduced a new interaction called fast forward, which is the fast addition of relevant items to the bucket based on the trained model, which it was shown to speed up the analytics when the model is trained well. It's a simple but simple interaction, but the users responded positively to it. So that's another contribution of the paper. All of the three systems can be, or at least pivot tables and II20 have demos, so you can check them out in action. To summarize, multimedia analytics is the combination of visual analytics plus multimedia analysis. Multimedia data are of high and continually rising importance to an increasing area of domains. There is a number of challenges, semantic gap, pragmatic gap, and the scale. There is high reward potential, and the time to move forward is now. And I mean, since I'm an active researcher in this department, if you would have a cool multimedia analytics idea that you would like to work on, maybe a paper or a thesis down the line, then if you're interested to collaborate with me, then feel free to contact me. Of course, we can make it happen. Yes, so that concludes the lecture. Are there any questions?
I don't see any questions in the chat for the moment.
Very good. So we can end it here. And we're going to meet next week for a very interesting guest lecture by Jack van Wijk, professor from the Eindhoven University of Technology. So I'm going to see you next Monday. Take care.